Welcome back. All right, I wanted to talk about something today that's been on my mind, been in my brain a little bit, rattling around. The idea that there's teams that lose every year in the playoffs, and people go, "See, this team's not ready. They need to just tear this down." The reality is that I do think the phrase "you have to lose in order to learn how to win" does have some bearing. There's merit to it, right? And so I wanted to go through this and set everything up as you see on the board here with playoff streaks, playoff droughts, getting into the President's Trophy a bit, talking about top performers over the last 10 years. I thought 10 years is a really good sample size. So, Toronto's at the top of the board in terms of playoff streaks with 9 seasons. And as much as people joke around and, they're never going to win, the reality is that the more times you get the kick at the can, you should have a better chance. You should be learning how to win through those losses. And I thought Toronto was as close as they could get. I thought after Game 6 against Florida, they had a good chance, and then they got destroyed in Game 7, which I understand is soul-crushing for Toronto fans, but they're still not that far off, as frustrating as that has to be. And the teams beneath them on this board are a good example of that, in that 8 seasons in a row, Colorado and Tampa have made it, and these two teams, you're winners of the Cup in 2020, 2021, and 2022. Tampa winning back-to-back in 2020 and 2021. Colorado winning in 2022. Both of those teams were seen as not playoff performers, and both of those teams were written off. Tampa after their meltdown in 2019 in the first round when they lost 4 in a row, and Colorado due to their inability to get past the second round. They just weren't able to get past the second round, and then when they did, Stanley Cup champions in 2022 against the Tampa Bay Lightning in the Stanley Cup final. So both of these teams are examples of what I'm talking about, that getting to the playoffs every year is important. Having a GM that knows what parts to add, what parts to subtract in order to get that success in the playoffs is also vastly more important, I think, than we necessarily give them credit for. GMs often get slagged in the media and from fans, but I do think that general managers, the better general managers in the NHL, know what their team needs, and they know how to go out and find it. Carolina has made the playoffs 7 seasons in a row. The storyline with Carolina is they're not able to get past the conference final, but that tells you they're close enough to make it to the Final Four in the NHL. What is it, 3 times in 5 or 6 years? It is difficult to put together a team that gets the conference final that many times over a 7-season period. So I give credit to the Carolina Hurricanes, as frustrating as that has to be for their fan base as well, but Carolina's close. Now, both Edmonton and Florida have made the playoffs 6 seasons in a row. And so we know the Stanley Cup final being between these two teams means one of them will be the Stanley Cup champion. So back-to-back years, a team that has made the playoffs 6 straight years, that's your Stanley Cup champion. Whereas last year would have been the 5th season in a row in the playoffs for Florida. Now it's their 6th season in a row. They could win it again, but Edmonton could win it as well. Edmonton's been written off plenty of times as a team that's built around 2 players and they don't have anything else going for them. And yet here they are in the Stanley Cup final for a 2nd straight year. And Florida, before that Stanley Cup win last year, before the run they went on, there were plenty of people who doubted them. Now the Stanley Cup final run the year before definitely helps to alleviate some of those doubts. But there was still that discussion of can they close it out? And when the series went from 3-0 Florida to 3-3 tie, I saw the comments and people saying this is an epic choke, this is a Florida choke, this is what Florida does in the playoffs, they're never going to win, and then they did. And so now the discussion point is, it's not fair. Florida shouldn't be winning another Stanley Cup. Okay, but this shows that consistency is important. And in both Edmonton and Florida's cases, well, in Florida's case, they've never had a team that's been this consistent to make the playoffs up until now. And the Oilers haven't been this consistently a playoff team, and a good one at that, really, since the Gretzky era ended. So both of these teams are showing how important consistency year after year is. 4 years in a row, Dallas and the LA Kings have made it. Dallas is seen as close. The LA Kings need to stop playing Edmonton in the first round. I'm not sure how to do that. I've seen people saying change the playoff seeding. 1 versus 8, we still saw the same teams play each other year after year. Not every series necessarily, but there were certainly cases where the same teams would be against each other again, and we go, surprise. And when you have a setup where, 8 teams make the playoffs, and especially if the same teams are making the playoffs year after year, you're probably going to see some rematches. It's going to happen. 3 seasons in a row for Vegas and the Winnipeg Jets. Now, Vegas wins the Stanley Cup in 2023, and I do feel like the one year that Vegas misses the playoffs deserves a bit of an asterisk. There were injury issues that year that prevented Vegas from making the playoffs, and they barely missed. So it's not like Vegas was way out of the playoffs and they were in the midst of some sort of a retool. They just barely missed. Winnipeg, on the other hand, it's 3 years in a row, and they won the President's Trophy, which we'll talk about when we get to this corner of the board. It is an interesting point with the Winnipeg Jets. Stay in the playoffs. Stay as a contender. Do everything you got to do. If Ehlers doesn't come back, get the players and stay. Stay a contending team, and who knows, maybe end up being the first Canadian team to win a Stanley Cup in the event that Edmonton doesn't win it this year. And if Edmonton does, maybe you go for a second straight Canadian Stanley Cup with the Jets next year. The Washington Capitals, they've been in the playoffs 2 straight seasons. I feel like, much like Vegas, maybe a bit of an asterisk in that they've only missed the playoffs once that I can remember over the last long time. And they won a Stanley Cup in 2018, which, when we get to the President's Trophy part of the board, we will come back to. But they did win the Stanley Cup. And before that Stanley Cup in 2018, Ovechkin was known for choking in the playoffs. The Capitals were known for not being able to get out of the second round. That had been their storyline for a very long time. And then they won a Stanley Cup. Now, there are teams who made the playoffs this year for the first time in a bit. Maybe in some cases have been a year. Maybe in some cases have been longer. Minnesota, Montreal, New Jersey, Ottawa, and St. Louis are all with a 1-season streak. Now, St. Louis won the Cup in 2019. St. Louis has been maybe a little different than some of the others in that they have had seasons where they missed the playoffs here and there, but they've never been that far out. So the 2019 St. Louis Blues, pretty consistently good team prior to that Stanley Cup victory. The first in that franchise's history. I do remember the posts about, well, St. Louis can't get out of the second round. St. Louis is never getting out of the second round. And then they did. Now, I'll go over to the playoff droughts and then we'll go to the middle of the board. On the playoff drought side of things, you've got Buffalo at 14 seasons. If you're going to win the Stanley Cup, you have to make the playoffs. I'm sorry that's the general rule. And Buffalo needs to figure this out. Detroit's missed the playoffs 9 years in a row. Anaheim's missed the playoffs 7 years in a row. San Jose's at 6 seasons in a row. Then you got 5 seasons in a row. You got Chicago, Columbus, and Philadelphia. So these are 3 teams here that are looking to get at least back in. Columbus is looking to get back in next year. They want to be on this side of the board next year. Chicago and Philly, I think, are looking to get better. I don't know how much better. With Gavin McKenna being in the next draft. Just imagine if Chicago wins the draft lottery and gets Gavin McKenna after getting Bedard. Just let that simmer just a little bit and just imagine. I'm sure the reaction to that would be completely sane and normal. Calgary and Pittsburgh have missed the playoffs 3 seasons in a row. Pittsburgh, of course, winning the Cup in 2016 and 2017. Pittsburgh had consistently been a playoff team for a very long time. They won the Cup in 2009. And then after that, there were definitely seasons Pittsburgh got eliminated early, and there were discussions about, well, they need to change things. This isn't working. This team isn't any good anymore. Well, Crosby, yeah, he had a couple of good seasons early on when it comes to the playoffs, but, this team's a bit overrated. Crosby's overrated, and then they won those next 2 Stanley Cups, and those comments definitely went by the wayside. Seattle, 2 seasons in a row they've missed the playoffs. I don't feel like with Seattle there's a whole lot to say here, other than they're trying to build themselves up to be on this side of the board. We'll see how things go. And then the teams that missed the playoffs this year, just that first season that they've missed consecutively. Boston, Nashville, the Islanders, Rangers, yes, Utah officially, this is their 1 season out of the playoffs. They are officially a new franchise. I know it's weird, but that's where we are. And Vancouver, who of course won their division last year. Now, looking at leading scorers over that 10-year period from 2016 until now, Kucherov, 124 games, 42 goals, 106 assists, 148 points. He's not going to be at the top when these Stanley Cup playoffs are over anymore because McDavid's tied with him. McDavid's played less games with 92 games played, but 43 goals, 105 assists, 148 points. So from 2016 until now, McDavid is tied for first in overall points. And I've seen the posts about how the league favors McDavid and they want this big story. McDavid's legitimately one of the best playoff performers in the game. He just is. Draisaitl, 92 games, 51 goals, 86 assists, 137 points. He's an excellent playoff performer as well. Mikko Rantanen, now of the Dallas Stars, of course, 99 games, 43 goals, 80 assists for 123 points. Brad Marchand. Marchand's a playoff performer, 110 games, 47 goals, 69 assists, 116 points. Any Boston fan could have told you that. Any Toronto fan could have told you that as well. McKinnon, 88 games, 53 goals, 62 assists, 115 points. Nathan McKinnon, a lot of criticism before Colorado won the Cup. Not as much since they won the Cup, although it's still out there. Victor Hedman, 122 games, 21 goals, 76 assists, 97 points. Definitely first ballot Hall of Famer there. And the only blue liner in the top 10. Point, 92 games, 44 goals, 45 assists, 89 points. So Braden Point, very consistent in the playoffs. Joe Pavelski, the only retired player in the top 10. 120 games, 48 goals, 39 assists for 87 points. And David Pastrnak, also 87 points. He's played 90 games, 39 goals, 48 assists for 87 points for David Pastrnak, who's an excellent playoff performer. And yet, I do see criticism with Boston of, well, I don't know about Pastrnak. Are you kidding me? So, if you look at the team records over that 10-year period, 125 games for Tampa, a record of 74-51. Tampa's played a ton of hockey. Vegas, 106 games played, 62-44 record. Dallas, 116 games, 61-55 record for Dallas. So Tampa and Vegas, both Stanley Cups during that period. Dallas, no. But a Stanley Cup final appearance, some conference finals. They've played a lot of hockey. Colorado, 87 games, 52-35 record. Florida, 90 games, 51-39 record. And Florida playing 90 games over a decade in the playoffs would have been unheard of prior to this run. Florida's just gone through it. And if you look at the playoff games they've played over the last 3 seasons now, they've been a Stanley Cup final in the last 3. That's definitely adding to the total. Edmonton, 92 games, 50-42 record. I think this is part of the reason why Florida and Edmonton are so well matched, and they're having a really strong, tight final through the first 2 games. They've both got similar levels of experience. They've both got a lot of veteran players and guys who know how to win. At the very least, to get there to that Stanley Cup final, we'll see which one gets over the finish line. Carolina, 89 games, 47-42 record. Boston, the sub-500 record on the board. 93 games, 45-48 record. The only sub-500 record on the board, and I'm not surprised. Pittsburgh, 82 games, 44-38 record. They have not won a round since their last, since 2018. They did win 1 round the year after they won the Stanley Cup, and they've not won a round since then. So it is interesting to look at these numbers and realize just how many of these Stanley Cup champions have played a lot of games. Washington, not so much, but Washington did miss the playoffs that 1 year. And since winning in 2018, they've struggled to win in the playoffs. They did get out of the first round this year, but that was the first time since 2018. Now, President's Trophies don't bode well for the team that wins it that year, but they bode well for the team that wins it in following seasons. So Washington won it in 2016 and 2017, and then won the Stanley Cup in 2018 when they didn't win the President's Trophy. Tampa Bay wins the President's Trophy in 2019, a prelude to them winning the Cup 2 seasons following. 2021, Colorado wins the President's Trophy, and then 2022 they won the Cup. 2022, Florida wins the President's Trophy. They go all the way to the final in 2023, and then they won the Cup in 2024. We'll see what's happening with 2025. That's still pending. And then no cups after winning a President's Trophy. Nashville in 2018, which was odd because they went to the final in 2017. Then they win the President's Trophy in 2018, but they weren't able to follow that up with a lot of playoff success. 2020 and 2023, Boston wins the President's Trophy. President's Trophy doesn't help Boston. It never has. Look at the history. A lot of it's Boston's fault that there's a President's Trophy curse. The Rangers won the President's Trophy last year. They missed the playoffs this year. And Winnipeg. We don't know yet the 2025 President's Trophy for the Winnipeg Jets, if that's a good omen, which it has been for 4 teams, or a bad omen, which it's been for 3 teams thus far. So I do think that's interesting that President's Trophy winners usually win the Stanley Cup after. At the very least, over the last 10 years, that's been the case. Maybe we see that again. But, Winnipeg fans will be hoping that's the case. And I think it'd be fun if Winnipeg did win a Stanley Cup. But I wanted to look at this. I think consistency is important. Being a good regular season team is still important because we talk a lot about parity. The reality is the teams that are at the top, the teams that play really well during the regular season, usually do have that success later. Now, Toronto being at the top of the board, I will say this in closing as well. Toronto has not always been a home team to start off in the playoffs, and while they've had excellent records overall, they do not have a President's Trophy, and winning the division this year, it feels like was another step for Toronto. It's just that trying to get over that finish line that does get a little bit tricky. But of the Stanley Cups that are on the board, the only Stanley Cups that belong to teams that missed the playoffs this year belong to Pittsburgh in 2016 and 2017. So it is interesting. I think that making the playoffs every year is really important, not just for an owner's bottom line when it comes to ticket sales. I think it's important to lose so you know how to win. I think LA is going to be very dangerous if they make the right moves over the next couple of years. I still think Dallas wins the Stanley Cup at some point soon. I think they're too good not to. But we'll see what happens. It's part of the fun with the National Hockey League is seeing what happens after I've set something up like this. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. And let me know your thoughts about which team do you think has made the playoffs a lot that could end up winning the next Stanley Cup or Stanley Cup soon? And which of the teams on this side of the board do you think, you know what, they're going to jump over here, they're going to win a Stanley Cup, and then go on a bit of a run? This is part of the reason why I, as a Canuck fan, get frustrated that the Canucks have, runs here and there, but they're not consistently excellent. And that consistent excellence from year to year is really important if you want to be a Stanley Cup champion, in my opinion. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe in the event that you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.